that. Hearts.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous night, o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all.
Order. Arms. Right guard. Step back. Left face. Forward.
Let's have a big round of applause for our friends at the South Meriden Fire Department. "21 years strong, South Meriden." Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this evening, God. We thank you for the ability in this incredibly still wonderful land that we live, a land of freedom, that we can come together and we can remember that awful day 21 years ago. We gathered tonight, Lord, to honor the fallen, and we gather to celebrate those who defend and protect us every single day. Thank you for the ability to do this. Thank you for folks that are here tonight. And help us bring ultimately honor and glory to you. We pray in Jesus' name, amen. Please be seated. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to New Life Church. This is our 21st annual 9/11 memorial service. And this is a good group. Wow, this is a nice looking group too. Yeah, good. So I was telling one of the firefighters, I had more questions this year than ever before. Why are we still doing this? 21 years. I mean, the 20th was last year. Why are we still doing it? Well, there's two reasons we're doing it. One is because I said we would. 21 years ago, I said that as long as I was the pastor of this church, we would gather like this annually and remember what was done to us. And I'm a lot older now. I won't be around that much longer, to the joy of many. But there's another reason. There's another reason, more important than because I said so. I remember when it happened, as most of you do. And I remember for weeks, for months, all over the country, across bridges, across streets, banners that read, "Never forget." So I kind of took that seriously because I think that means we're supposed to remember. And it's not that people forget. It's not that people, historically don't recall what happened. But as a culture, we've certainly moved on. And so, everything is normal on 9/11. We have football games. We have an IndyCar race this afternoon. Will Power won championship. Yeah. There's some, certainly New York City had its gathering. Connecticut had its official gatherings Friday night, Short Island. But there's a lot less. So I just feel like as long as you guys are going to come out, I feel like we should do this every year. So I'm so grateful for you. Thank you. Thank you for coming out. And every year we're blessed with some of our civic leaders that are here, and grateful that you guys come out. And many of you have been here almost every year. I'll talk about the one outlier in a few minutes, but I'm so thankful to have a regular, the mayor of the city of Meriden here every year. Love for him to come up and say a few words. Mayor Kevin Scarpati, come on up, Kev. Thank you.
Let's give a round of applause for Pastor Will, for never forgetting. First, just a couple of introductions. From the Meriden City Council, we have City Councilor and Minority Leader Dan Brunet. And from our state delegation, we have State Representative Hilda Santiago. So thank you both for being with us today as well. As Pastor Will mentioned, 21 years ago, we all vowed never to forget. And we all gather annually, and all of you here in this room, remembering to never forget and to live those words. However, it's not necessarily to remember on the 11th of September. It's to remember year-round. And what are we charged with remembering, I think is most important. And so last evening, as many of us probably over the last 24 hours tend to watch a lot of the documentaries that are on TV this time of year. Last evening I watched a documentary, not about the attacks, but about what happened previously. It was about the day before, September 10th, 2001, and just how normal life was on that day, both in New York City and across the world. So there was an upcoming election that was happening in New York City for New York's mayor. So there was a lot of campaigning going on. The weather was a little bit crazy, and there was just your everyday news stories that were going on, and people were just living their daily lives. Obviously, September the 11th, 2001 would not only change the lives of New Yorkers, but would change the lives of all of us who remember it and remember what life was like before September 11th, 2001, and then after. And we stand here today pledging not to forget. But I have to beg the question that if we have forgotten the bravery of the men and women, not only in fire, police, EMS, but your average citizen that risked their lives to save others, that ran up the stairs instead of running down, that went to New York City and the Pentagon day after day to volunteer their services to rescue anyone they could. Let us not forget the bravery of our first responders that day and every day that protect us. And so let us thank those men and women in our police departments and fire departments, but also in our military, who then fought for our freedoms. They didn't forget, and we shouldn't forget them either. Let us not forget what it was like, as Pastor Will described, in those weeks and months following September 11th. There was this sense of being an American. There was a sense of being one. It was us versus them. They were the bad guys. We were Americans. And everyone was on our side. Let us not forget what that was like, because I fear as though we may have forgotten. A couple of weeks ago, I was walking through a parking lot and I saw a bumper sticker on the back of a car. It was a faded bumper sticker that was beginning to peel and chip with a faded word that said, "Never forget." And I thought to myself, how many people either are stuck behind this car in traffic or walk by this car daily and have no idea what that bumper sticker resembles? Today we gather because we will never forget. And I don't challenge you to remember, but to educate others on what that was like. Our youth, our students, those who couldn't remember because they either weren't born or were too young to recall. But we gather because we vowed never to forget. And lastly, I'll leave you with a quote from President Bush. There is one in your pamphlet, but what he also said that evening when he addressed the nation was that the terrorist attacks on 9/11 may have shaken the foundations of our largest buildings, but they will not shake the foundation of America. God bless America. Thank you very much for having me.
Wow. Outstanding. Just like wine, you're getting better with age. In your bulletin, there's an insert, as we provide every year, of all of the Connecticut residents who lost their lives that day. You can take time and continue to pray for the family. I watched the show, as you, Kevin, I was watching a lot of channels and television. I saw a Discovery program about survivors, and one was the life of a fireman, and just how completely upended his life became after 9/11, and realizing he was one of the survivors, that so many of his friends had perished, and how it impacted, even today, still the rest of his life. And I think for people like that, people who served, not just people who died, but people who served, we need to honor them. We've been so blessed over the years. We've had such wonderful speakers. And I remember the second year we had Brian Clark. Brian Clark worked for a banking company in the South Tower, and he was trapped up there. And he finally got all his people down the one stairway they could find. And as he was the safety agent for his company, right? He was in charge of making sure his people got out. And as he was making his way down, he heard screams from a person. And so instead of just ignoring that and saving himself, he stopped and he kicked down a door and broke through some concrete, and he found a guy trapped under some rubble. And he was able to free him and pull him up and helped him get out of the building. And about 5 10 minutes after they were out, the building collapsed. He saved a guy named Stanley Primnoth. And we had Stanley Primnoth here our third year. And so I try to text everybody that's been here. Once you've been in the family, it's kind of a great team that we've built. And so I texted Stanley and Brian. We had Chief Jay Jonas, Ladder Company 8, amazing story. Chief and I texted. We had Brian Birdwell, Lieutenant Colonel Brian Birdwell was the only survivor at the point of impact in E-Ring in the Pentagon. And I'm going to do something different tonight. I think it's kind of cool. I don't know, maybe. I want to have a little giveaway. And so I've got some books here. And this was a book that was written by Lieutenant Colonel Birdwell called Refined by the Fire. Oddly enough, I just saw yesterday morning he did an interview on a news channel. And I texted him right away, "Hey, Brian, great job." And, "Oh, it was so good to be with you guys." So this is his book, and we're gonna have 3 to give away, and we have questions. It's a quiz. It's something different after 21 years, right? All right. Now, these are all inside baseball questions, so I don't know how many people will get this, but I've got 2 I'm going to give 2 random ones away. So we started this, obviously, 21 years ago, and at the time, the church was in the small former pharmacy building in South Meriden. How many 9/11 services did we have in the South Meriden location? How many years did we have 9/11 in the South Meriden location?
5.
Who said 5? Yeah, John Parker, come on up here, buddy. Get a book. Well, good, nice. Okay, there you go. Enjoy that. Well, he was right. It was a good lucky guess. We'll do more. So I said it's great. People we can count on that are here year after year. The mayor. Another one, the former. I don't know if you're ever a former chief of our fire department in Meriden. And he had been here every year. And then all of a sudden he missed a year. And it was for the lamest of reasons. His daughter was getting married. Come on, dude. And so would you welcome Chief Jim Traynor? We want to hear from the Chief. Come on up. I know. Thank you. There you go, Chief. Thank you.
He's never going to let me live that down. But he gets a lot of mileage out of it, so if you got a good joke in your repertoire, you keep. Tomorrow, my daughter will be married 13 years. And praise the Lord, my grandson, Paul, he got out of the hospital today. He's there for 2 weeks. And he's got his shining smile. We're happy to. I got up this morning, I took a shower. I went out to my dresser, opened the drawer, and took out my Brian Sweeney shirt. And I wore it all day long. Until I had a change to come here. It's getting kind of old, getting a little tattered, but I wear it every night. And this morning, at 9:46 or 8:46, I got on the computer and I made a donation to Tunnel Towers. I do that every 9/11 also. I'm going to preach to the choir because I'm going to talk about remembering, never forget. These people never forget, and they're always here. And there's old faces and there's new faces, which is good because they carry memories ahead. So what I'm going to do, I want you all, I've done this before and you trusted me, and I'm going to do it again. I want everybody to close their eyes. And in their mind's eye, I'm sure you can remember it. I'm sure you can see the image. Okay? And as I say these important points, remember those images. This will reinforce us. This will ground us so that we do never forget.
You might.
Flight 11.
I can't hear.
Flight 11 crashes into the World Trade Center North Tower. All passengers aboard instantly killed. And the employees of the World Trade Center were trapped above the 91st floor. We all remember that image. That was at 8:46. 9:03. Keep the clock ticking in your brain, in your head too. Tick, tock, tick. Flight 175 crashes into the World Trade Center's South Tower. All passengers aboard are killed instantly. So are an unknown number of people in the tower. Hijackers attack Flight 93. Flight 77 crashes into the Pentagon. All passengers aboard are instantly killed. So are 125 civilians and military personnel in the building. Passengers aboard Flight 93 begin to run up to the cockpit. Jared, the pilot, begins to roll the plane back and forth in an attempt to destabilize the revolt. 9:59, South Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. I couldn't believe it. "10:02 a.m., Flight 93 plows into an empty field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Although its ultimate target was unknown, it was likely that it was headed towards the White House or the U.S. Capitol. 10:28, the North Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. (2,977) souls perished on 9/11. 343 of my brother firefighters died. 71 law enforcement perished. Those were police and transit authority. 55 military people perished at the Pentagon. And also remember that numerous numbers of people who we don't even have to count have perished because of the pollution and the toxic materials that were in the air, and also the people who went down to do the rescues and body recoveries. May they all rest in peace. May we never forget them. Thank you.
Our band's going to come out now. We're going to do a song. I remember some of you were there. How many were right after it happened? There was a candlelight vigil at Hubbard Park. How many of you were at that candlelight vigil? I was asked to speak. I was one of the speakers, and the question came to me and said, "Where was God on 9/11?" And I said, "Are you kidding me? God was all over the place. It could have been so much worse. We were originally thinking 10, 20, 30,000 people had been killed, and not that 2,977 is an incredibly painful number, but it's a lot better than 29,000 people getting killed." And so you wonder, where was God? God was there the whole time because God's our protector.
come out of agreement with the life that you have left me on my own. I am not alone. I come out of agreement with the worry and the fear I've come to know. No, they won't have a hold on me. Protector, you never, never, never let me go. You said you wouldn't leave me and you won't. You're right by my side. Protector, I come into agreement with the truth that you are who you say you are. I can trust your heart. I come into agreement with what heaven has declared over my life. 'Cause I know that you fight for me. Protector, you never, never, never let me go. You said you wouldn't leave me and you won't. You're right by my side. Protector, you hide me in the shadow of your wings. Your presence is my peace, my covering, my song in the night. Protector, no weapon, no worry will prosper against me. No darkness, no evil will tease or torment me. No weapon, no worry will prosper against me. No darkness, no evil will tease or torment me. All power, dominion, to one name is given. My fortress, my freedom, my refuge, my Jesus. Dominion, to one name is given. My fortress, my freedom, my refuge, my Jesus. Protector, you never, never, never let me go. You said you wouldn't leave me and you won't. You're right by my side. Protector, you hide me in the shadow of your wings. Your presence is my peace, my covering, my song in the night. Protector,
You know, I don't know about you, but my life is hard enough as it is. And I don't know how, if it wasn't for God, I don't know how I get through some of the stuff I get through. I don't know how people get through life without God. You know, it's just hard to imagine some of the stuff that you hear about and the tragedies that people endure. Man, it's pretty hard. I got one more question now. So from South Meriden, we had Calvary Baptist Church merge with us before church mergers were fashionable. It was a pretty fun time. How many years did we have the 9/11 service at B Street? No. Who said 7? I mean, you have process elimination. Just pay attention, right? Pay attention. Yeah, good. We've been so blessed every year to get the right speaker at the right time, at the right year. This year's no exception. We have Lou Velozzi as our speaker tonight. Lou is a retired agent from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives. He began his career in the Justice, Immigration, and National Relations Department in Los Angeles in 1991. 1996, he served 2 years for the U.S. Marshal Service, and he transferred to ATF. He remained active there until his retirement in 2016. He's got a tremendous story, decades of undercover work. He's personally credited with taking over 1,000 illegal guns off the street. And he's got a connection to 9/11. He'll talk to you about that. So without further ado, let's give a warm Meriden Wallingford welcome to retired ATF agent Lou Velozzi. Get him, brother.
Don't clap too much till you hear my presentation. So, this will probably be the hardest speech I've ever given for 3 reasons. One, because Pastor Will told me to keep it to 35 minutes, which for me is super hard. 2, because I'm in a church, so I can't use profanity, which for me is really hard as well. And 3, on a more serious note, this is the anniversary of one of the worst days of my life. I'm sure many of you, our country as a whole, and it's still hard for me even to talk about it. It affected me in such a way, but I'm not just going to talk about 9/11. I'm going to tell you guys my story. This will be the most different 9/11 speech you'll ever hear, I guarantee that, because I want to leave you with my message. And I usually do this speech for these huge law enforcement conferences. The last one I did was California Gang Investigators Association in San Diego, and it was about 2,000 gang investigators, cops, who all look like they could be in the gangs they're investigating. And they're a tough crowd. I was the closer on a Friday afternoon, after they've been sitting there for a whole week in a chair listening to people. And you know what's on their mind, right? Friday afternoon in San Diego, they're all thinking happy hour. And here I come for 4 hours after lunch, right? And I follow the Narcos guys, who are friends of mine. I don't know if you guys familiar with Narcos, the Netflix series. Steve Murphy and Javier Pena, 2 former DEA agents who were largely responsible for capturing and killing Pablo Escobar. And I have to follow those guys' presentation. And cops let you know if you start bombing or if you're going on too long. That's why I'm glad to be here in a church with nice people. So I'm going to tell you my story. I'm going to tell you how 9/11 affected me and how it changed my career. And there was very good outcomes from that, and there was very negative outcomes from that. And I want to leave you with my message, because my goal every time I give my presentation is for everybody to walk out of this room with a different perspective. And, maybe through my mistakes, walking out of here as a little better person, I hope. So I'm going to tell you who I am, and why I'm standing up here talking to you. And I got a little short. I'm going to run some pictures through here. I'm just going to start out with a video. And it's shameless self-promotion, this video. It's embarrassing. I wrote a book, and my literary agent hooked me up with this documentary company who wanted to do a documentary about one of the big mistakes I made during my career, where I hired a future defendant, a guy who I had bought a huge amount of cocaine from. I hired him in one of my undercover operations to work at the fake business we had set up to give us more credibility. And it blew up in our faces. We all became really attached to the guy. He was a great guy for multi-convicted felon who was a drug dealer. And we had very conflicting feelings about it. But anyway, so this documentary company, they submitted this documentary and it won 8 international documentary festival awards. And I earned absolutely zero money. There's no money in documentaries, just in case you're wondering, from any of that. But they called me one day and they said, hey, we want to do something for you. We know the book's coming out. What's your theme song? I was like, I don't have a theme song, right? Who has a theme song? Like professional wrestlers maybe, but I don't have a theme song. And they said, well, if you had a theme song, what would it be? And I said, Midnight Rider, Allman Brothers. So they said, okay. So they made this little video, and if, I'm just going to open with it. So the only reason I show you this is the footage they used was some undercover footage that I was able to get my hands on, and it's of me buying guns from the cartel, from the worst cartel out there, the Sinaloa cartel, who are just, they're probably one of the most evil people on the face of this earth, who commit some of the most atrocious crimes you can even imagine. And these are Sinaloa cartel members who I was buying drugs from, who also started selling me a bunch of guns. So if we can just roll the video and then we'll get into the presentation.
Betrayal was my job. As an undercover agent, betraying people is your job. And it's something you have to live with, but usually not a difficult thing to live with, because the people you're betraying are committing serious crimes. My name is Lou Velosi. I'm originally from New York. I was a federal agent for 26 years. I became an undercover agent for the last 2 decades of my career. My calling card as an undercover agent became storefront operations. Undercover stings, where we would set up fictitious businesses. These businesses were owned and operated by the government, using undercover federal agents as the owners and employees of these operations, with the purpose of making those communities we were in safer communities by purchasing crime guns out of the hands of the criminals that we're using. We received a call from the chief of police in Statesboro, Georgia, and he said, man, we are having problems here in Statesboro. They were starting to have home invasions. They were starting to have a lot of armed robberies. The drug dealing was out of control. They were starting to see national gangs. Could you do one in our city? So we did.
You know what's funny? That's the wrong video. That's not the video I was telling you about. But that works, right? That works, I guess. Wow, that's embarrassing. Yeah, thank you. So, 1991, I had graduated from college the year before. I went to Lafayette College in Pennsylvania. Division I AA powerhouse. You've all heard of it, right? Yeah. Not exactly a pipeline to the NFL. So I played football there, and I graduated with a degree in business and economics, and I left that school not knowing much about either subject, to be honest with you. And I was kind of lost. I was lost in life, so I took a job at a bank, making about $8 an hour, in a room with no windows, filing computer printouts. And one day I got a call from a guy I had played ball with, and he was down in the Bronx. And he's like, what are you doing? He goes, I'm at my brother's apartment. He goes, come on down and visit. You sound miserable. So I said, okay. I got in my car and I drove down. I had never met his brother before. And we're sitting on the porch, and this guy pulls up in a Corvette, and he gets out, and he's got, remember, this is Miami Vice time, right? He's got the feathered back, long hair. He's an Italian guy like me. He's got the wife beater, with a really cool shirt over it, and he's got a Beretta 92F tucked in his waistband. And I'm looking at him like, this is the coolest person I've ever seen in my life, this guy. And he introduced me to him. We sat down, and it turns out he was a DEA agent, and he had just gotten back from Panama. and he worked undercover. And I started asking him questions. And he talked to me about his career, about what he does for about 45 minutes over a couple beers. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. I never had any, I didn't want to be a law enforcement guy. I didn't want to be a uniform cop. I wanted to be an undercover agent now. Unfortunately, you can't just become an undercover agent. You got to pay your dues. So I watched as many Miami Vice episodes as I could, to do some background. And I tell you, here's what I found out on a serious note. Crockett and Tubbs, they were going to the mansions, and they were on the yachts with the supermodels, driving Lambos. And the reality of undercover work, I found, was I was going to the projects and the ghetto and the trailer parks, and I was driving an old Monte Carlo, and there was no supermodels anywhere to be seen. But I knew this is what I wanted to do, and I just started putting in with all the agencies, every alphabet letter agency there was out there. I didn't even know ATF, who they were at the time. But I wasn't qualified. I didn't have 3 years investigative experience and all that. But I was still in test-taking mode, being fresh out of college. I scored high on a test, and I got hired as a special agent with INS out in Los Angeles. And man, did I pay my dues. I got out there, and they put us new guys right on the streets. And we worked in the worst areas of Los Angeles. We were working with these gangs, and this was 1991, and people didn't know about MS-13 around the country yet, right? We were working MS-13. People didn't know about these Central American gangs who were coming into our country, and even the American gangs, the Bloods and the Crips, they didn't know anything about this level of violence that these people were committing. They were beheading people. They were beheading rival gang members and rival drug dealers. So I got on the streets, learning about these guys, working on these guys, and I was lucky enough to land on an LAPD task force. Can we go to the next slide? So there I am. There's my first day at the academy down there, and that guy right there had no idea what he was in for, right? A little bit goofy, not really taking life seriously, and I grew up in the suburbs. I'm from Albany, New York. And my first assignment was Rampart, the Rampart Division in Los Angeles. That guy right there was in for a rude awakening. So go to the next slide. All right, we're gonna have to, this actually is the long version of this. So I tell you what, maybe we'll bag the presentation. Let me just talk, because that's what I do best anyway. All right? So I got on this LAPD task force with ATF, LAPD, and INS. And I met these ATF guys. And they all looked like the DEA guy, who I had met earlier. These guys, when they walked in the room, it looked like the Hells Angels just walked into the room. And even the LAPD guys, the old gritty vets, respected these guys. They were the ones who were always in the thick of things. They were the ones who were doing the undercover work. They were involved in every shootout going on. And I knew right then, they were the cowboys of federal law enforcement. That's where I wanted to be. That's where I was going to be able to be an undercover agent. So I did about 6 years out there in LA, and the problem was ATF's small agency, they weren't really hiring. So I jumped over to the US Marshals just to get back to the East Coast, chase fugitives for 2 years, 1 year in New York and 1 year in Puerto Rico. And ATF finally opened up. I put in, I got in ATF, they sent me to Georgia. And I was very lucky that my partner we were still under the Treasury Department. This was pre-9/11. My partner was an undercover guy, my first partner. I actually did an undercover deal my first day on the job. I hadn't been to the academy yet. They gave me a badge and a gun, and my partner said, hey, I got an informant. He's going to introduce you to this convicted felon who has a gun to sell, and you're going to buy it. And it was at a Crystal Burger down in Georgia. Crystal's like the South's version of White Castle. So the informant, I meet the informant, I put all the gear on, and back then it was big bulky stuff, recording devices and all that. And I walk in and he introduces me to this huge guy, this big gangbanger. And I've been a Fed now for 8 years, but I've never done any undercover. I have no idea what I'm doing. So this guy says, come on, we're gonna go in the bathroom. And this is lunchtime at a fast food restaurant, a ton of people in it. So I follow him into the bathroom, and we go in the bathroom, and there's a urinal, and there's a commode, right? You know, with the partition and a sink. And he says, go in there, pointing to the commode. Okay, I guess this is how undercover works. So I walk in there, and he walks in behind me, and he shuts the door and latches it. And like I said, this guy was about 5 inches taller than me. He was a big dude. So we're like this, right here. And now I'm thinking to myself, maybe I've made some poor choices already on my first day because my options are severely limited right now. And I know there's a gun gonna come out, right? That's part of it. So he pulls a gun out of his waistband. He had wanted $250 for it. I remember it was my first buy. I had $300 in my pocket of ATF money. I gave him $300 for the gun he wanted $250 for because I just wanted the gun and I wanted to get out of the commode. And as we walked out, you know, I didn't know if I was supposed to sit down with him and break bread. Like, what's the protocol, right? You know, so all I knew was I had the gun and I bolted to the door and I got in my brand new undercover vehicle and drove away. And as I was driving to the meet point, you know, with the cover team, I looked at that gun I had just bought. And it was the best feeling I've ever had in my life. I had just taken a crime gun off the street from a really bad guy. And I was addicted. I was totally addicted. I knew I had found something that I was actually good at and something that made me feel like I was making a difference. And it started right then, and it didn't stop. So for the next 3 years, I just started getting my feet wet. Nickel and dime drug buys, gun buys from convicted felons, from gang members. And that's kind of how you do it. You get your feet wet with those small buys in the hopes of getting into larger cases, long-term infiltrations, right? You can't just like jump in and start working undercover your first day and, you know, become a made mafia guy, right? You kind of have to pay your dues first. So that's what I did, man. I would do anything. I was buying guns in alleyways, in car washes, in the ghetto, parking lots. I would buy dime bags, anything. You know, I just, whatever it was, I never said no. I was getting my feet wet. So in 1999, I got the first call to do a long-term infiltration with the Outlaws motorcycle gang. They're kind of the rival to the Hells Angels. They're really big in the Southeast. They're all over the country. They're big in Chicago. And the only reason I got the call, it was because I was the only agent in the ATF field division other than the guy who, the undercover who was already kind of working with these guys who had a motorcycle license. It wasn't because of my skill, but because when I was 18, I had a Yamaha Virago in New York for like 6 months, so I got a motorcycle license, and that license stayed, you know, it stayed on my license and it transferred over to my undercover license. I had no idea how to ride a Harley Davidson. I knew nothing about outlaw motorcycle culture. So they give me this shiny hardtail because, you know, it was a chopper type bike with no shock absorbers. And they had just put it together from, you know, stolen parts and invested all sorts of money into it. And we were up in the North Georgia mountains, And my first night, it was kind of a rainy night. It was nighttime, and I'm trying to follow these guys who ride about 100 miles an hour on these motorcycles. And I'm like asking my partner, is it 1 down and 4 up when you shift to Harley? And he's like, oh, God. So my first night, I dumped the bike in a ditch. I go down, break my collarbone. And the 2 informants, when they finally get back, because they see I'm not in the pack anymore, they're looking at me, and these are some big, tough guys, and they're like, you're asking us to take this guy, into the outlaw clubhouse? So, I tell you what I did. I said, you know what, and the bike was mangled. I said, let's pick this bike up. We're bending the mirrors back in place. It was still rideable. And my partner's like, I'm going to call 911, we'll get you. I said, let's go to the clubhouse. So even though those informants never had much faith in me, as an outlaw biker, they knew I at least had heart. Because there I was with one shoulder like this, and I showed up at that clubhouse. And I don't know if anyone in here has ever been in an outlaw motorcycle clubhouse. But I tell you what, they're scary places, right? With some big, scary people. And so I didn't say anything. I shut my mouth, and I watched, and I listened, and I realized, I'm out of my element. So I went up, about 45 minutes into it, I went up to the president of the Outlaws, who was there. His name was Pierre. And I said, Pierre, I said, sir, I called him sir. I said, I don't want to offend you or anyone here. I don't know your culture. I don't know your rules, and I don't want to offend anybody. I want to be one of you. I want to learn from you. And he loved that, because I had appealed to his ego. So he took me under his wing, and I was like his favorite guy at that point on. So that started out my career, doing these long-term infiltrations. 3 years into my undercover career, I was in court in Georgia, federal court, on the morning of September 11th, 2001. And we were first on the docket, and it was magistrate court, and it was weird. One of the law clerks came in during the proceeding, and he went behind the bench and whispered something into the judge's ear, walked away, and the judge said, we'll take this matter up at a later time. And he walked out of the courtroom. And we were like, wow, that's bizarre. And we leave court, and we get our phones and pagers, because we still had pagers back then, and they're blowing up. Get back to the office, get to the office. And we get to the office, televisions are on, and we're under attack. Just horrendous. So we're all stunned. Nobody knows what to do. This isn't in the playbook, right? Any of us, whether you are a fireman, a cop, just a citizen, no matter what. There was no playbook, right? So we get our marching orders. Get to the airport in Atlanta, get all your gear, just pack a bag and put all your tactical gear on, go to the Atlanta airport, and detain and question every single person in that airport who looks like a Middle Easterner. We're like, what? Right? So we did. I'm talking to guys, and they're like, I'm from India, right? So, but again, there was no playbook. Nobody really knew what to do. So after that first night of doing that, and we finally are starting to realize what's going on, my partner says to me, we got to get up to New York. I said, yeah, you're right. So we happened to have a gun trafficking case we were working at the time that originated in New York, like most gun trafficking cases did, because these gangbangers from New York would come down to states like Georgia, states like Florida, where it's a lot easier to get guns, and they would have people buy them for them, and they would bring them up to New York, and they'd sell, this piece of crap 9mm you could buy in Georgia for $110. They'd sell for $1,500 to their gangster buddies on the streets of New York. And I had done some undercover on one of these cases. We had flipped this girl who was buying the guns for the bad guys, and she had introduced me to one of them. So we had done kind of a sting operation where I went in and bought a bunch of guns for him, and he started taking them to New York, and we took them down. But then we had the whole component in New York of the bad guys, so we had to go up there and interview people, with our counterparts from the New York office. Did we have to go up there on that day, the day after 9/11? No, but I called my boss and I said, George, we really need to go to New York to do this interview. And he was like, yeah. He goes, you know what? Get in your car and go. Because he was a New Yorker. So my partner and I drove up on 9/12 and we went to Ground Zero. Now, neither one of us certainly looked like police officers. I had a ZZ Top beard at the time with a shaved head, and he looked like a freak. But we had badges, and that's all that mattered on that day, at Ground Zero. And this was before they were very organized. The cops and the firemen were kind of battling things out still, and they saw our badges, and they let us in. And, I couldn't believe what I saw. It changed me forever, what I saw. They didn't, I can't stand here and tell you that I spent weeks up there, digging out stuff. We were able to do about 2 days up there before they finally wisened up and ATF was like, get out of here. But I got those 2 days in, at Ground Zero, helping a little bit. And that's all anyone wanted to do at that time, if you remember, was help out a little bit. If I could take one piece of twisted metal out of there, that might help or something. But our New York offices, so when I interviewed for the job at ATF, our office was in the World Trade Center. It was Building 6, the shortest building of the Trade Center. And miraculously, all the ATF agents got out alive. Unfortunately, many have died from 9/11 related illnesses since. One of those was a guy named Bill Sheldon, and I had his picture in the presentation, but it doesn't matter. He was murdered. He died on March 2nd, 2015 from, 9/11 related illnesses, and he's a homicide victim, and it was murder, right? This was not an act of war. An act of war is when one nation commits an act that instigates or provokes another nation to respond into a war. This was a group of evil people who decided they were going to murder as many Americans as they could. So everyone who died at 9/11 is a murder victim, a homicide victim. And everyone who has died since, Bill Sheldon, William Sheldon, who died on March 2nd, 2015, there's another murder victim, a homicide victim. Because if I shoot you today and you live, I can't be accused of murder, all right? If you die as a result of those wounds 5 years later, now you're a homicide victim and I'm a murderer. That's how that works. So everyone who dies, every fireman, every civilian, every police officer is a homicide victim. Bill Sheldon was a young guy. I was in my early 30s when this happened. And the first thing I wanted to do was join the military. But I was into my career already for 10 years. And, there was a lot of young guys joining up. The military wasn't really looking for guys in their mid-30s, right? With bad knees. Bill Sheldon was 23 years old, okay? He was on it with ATF for about a year and a half, and they couldn't get him out of Ground Zero. He was there right at the beginning. He was there for days and then weeks and then months. ATF has a national response team that responds to any explosive scene or arson scene or any of that. And they responded to the Pentagon. They didn't respond to ground zero because the New York office said, we got this. And every agent in that office they refused to leave. Bill Sheldon was one of them. He felt so strongly about it. Immediately after, when there was nothing left to do at the scene, he left ATF, he joined the military. He joined the Army. He went overseas and he saw combat. When he eventually came back, he left the Army and he rejoined ATF. And he started, he resumed a great career, but unfortunately, he became sick, like so many others. And, his end of duty was March 2nd, 2015. And unfortunately, he's one of many law enforcement officers, firefighters, who have died since. Again, one of many homicide victims from what happened that day. So when I went back to Georgia afterward, I was a changed person. After I saw what I saw, I was a changed. How could you not be? How could you not be? Just, the images, and I had them in the thing, but you've all seen them, the twisted steel and the smoke and the smell. It was overwhelming, and I was angry. So I decided, I'm just going to take it out. I'm going to protect America by taking every bad guy, every crime gun I can off the street. And I'm not going to say it reinvigorated my career because I was already full steam ahead, but it changed me as a person. And I got back and I jumped into my undercover role, just with a different purpose and a different sense of meaning. And I did murder for hires. A doctor hired me to kill his wife. And I started getting a name for myself, in the undercover community, which led to more undercover assignments, more opportunities. I did a Hell's Angel infiltration in California, in San Diego. The biker thing definitely wasn't working out well for me because of my inability really to ride a motorcycle very well. So I went back to the gang thing because the way I saw it, gangs are the big problem in this country, and they still are today. The gangs, the cartels, and that's how I was going to serve. That was my service to my country, by infiltrating these organizations and doing the best I could to get all the guns I could off the street, because every gun I bought in an undercover deal, right? If I bought one gun on that day in an undercover deal, how many lives have you saved, right? How many lives could that gun have taken out? How many has it already taken? That gun, if it could tell a story, how many hands has it been through out there in the streets? How many bad guys have passed that gun around? The reason usually why most bad guys sell their guns is because they're hot, right? They just used it in a murder or used it in an armed robbery or something. So they call it unass, but they want to unass it. They want to get rid of it. And that's usually why they sell them. So every gun has a story to tell. And it was my mission to get everyone I could off the streets. And this is my cautionary tale. And this is what I want to leave you with, because I know I'm running short. So I ran as hard as I could. But unfortunately, I was married by this time, and I had children, 2 young children. But I was so busy saving the world in my mind that I lost my priorities. You know what? I can't make it to this game. I'll make it to the next one. But that never happens, right? And you can't ever make up those games you miss, right? I'll make it to this. I can't make this recital. I'll make the next one. Yeah, that didn't happen. And all of a sudden, my wife is like, hey, you're coming home. You're gone for 5 months, and you come home, and you're being a little short with me, a little short with the kids. Don't come in this house after being gone for 5 months and act like that. And, my response is, listen, I can't just turn it off, right? When I walk in the house, it's, I'm not a light switch. And her response is, well, you better put a dimmer on that switch. Because I didn't marry a gangster. I didn't marry an outlaw or a mobster. I married a guy with a college degree who was a law enforcement officer who wanted to do good things, not a gangster. So you better check yourself. But those words went right over my head because my mission was more important than what should have been my priorities. Faith, family, and friends. That's what my priorities should be. They should have been. My priority was taking crime guns off the street, saving the world, right? Making a name for myself out there in that undercover world. After what I saw at 9/11, I was so committed, to saving our country. That's what I could do. That's what I brought to the table. This set of skills that I had. I was an asset to the government. You could drop me in almost any world, and I would get in, and I would infiltrate. And I did it at the detriment, of my personal life, of my family. And I thought it was more important at the time. So 9/11 really, it actually did great things for my career. But because of my obsession, my personal life was a train wreck, right? It was falling apart. And my bosses weren't going to stop me. And I don't mean this in a bad way toward them, but they were seeing statistics like they'd never seen before. I started doing storefront operations where I was setting up fake businesses. And it was like a spider web. We would lure in these criminals. We would do it in these areas where the violence and the guns and the drugs, and it was out of control. And we would lure in these gang members and these bad guys. And we got into organized crime and all sorts of things and just weave a web. And we would end up at the end of a 12-month operation with 100 federal defendants, 400 crime guns we bought off the streets, as much drugs, as many kilos as ATF would give me the money for, we were buying. And I found myself, I was in my mid-40s, and I was at the top of my game professionally. I was receiving all sorts of awards, right? OCDF, like the big one, Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force. Case of the Year, Project Safe Neighborhoods, which is Justice Department program, Gang Investigation of the Year, Gun Investigation of the Year, United States Attorney's Office, Law Enforcement Officer of the Year. At the top of my game. But you know what awards I wasn't getting? Father of the Year, Husband of the Year, Friend of the Year. I'd get called from, friends I grew up with. I'd get a message. They'd call me, hey, man, haven't heard from you, want to see how you're doing. I'd be like, I can't call anyone back during this case. I'll call them after the case is over. That never happened, right? So I lost my priorities, chasing what had become my dream, right? And that, my dream was to work undercover, was to make this country safer, but at what cost? So again, a cautionary tale, what I like to pass on, and I'm usually doing this to police officers, but it applies to everybody. And I tell people this always at the end of my presentation. Please learn from my mistakes. And what I love to tell people is when you leave this room, okay, when you leave this great church, whoever you're with, whoever you get in the car with, or when you get home, whoever's there at home or whoever you're going to see tomorrow, don't take them for granted. Tell them you love them. Because it's not a given that they're going to be there tomorrow, right? Or next week or next year. Priorities, faith, family, and friends. It's more important than your job. It's more important than your dreams. Who's around you? Whoever's around you right now is more important. So do me a favor, and please take that from me because I made that mistake. I've been lucky enough now to spend about 7 years of my life rebuilding those relationships because God gave me that chance to rebuild. So don't make that mistake. And when you leave this room, tell whoever you're with that you love them. And don't take anyone for granted. And God bless you.
That's a story I could hear for a long time. I'm sure there's so much else. We may have to just have you come back to tell some of the other parts of your career story. I've never been in, I've never been in a outlaw clubhouse. But I think years ago, before I met Jesus, I was in an outlaw outhouse. Closest I got. And a lot of what you said really does. I'm just sitting here thinking about how it really does apply to almost anyone. It can apply in any circumstance, any situation. It really. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to ask the band to come out one more time, and even within the context of Lou's talk, no matter what we're going through in life, as a nation, a company, a family, as individuals, we're well reminded to think that the battles that we face in life, difficult, personal, at times overwhelming, we're well to be remembered that these battles we fight are not our battles, but they're the Lord's battles. And He'll give us the strength to carry through.
And all I see is the battle. You see my victory.
All right, well, that's it, guys. I'm glad you came tonight. Are you glad you came tonight? Thank you so much. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you, South American Volunteer Fire Department. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief, as always. Great job, Lou. Thanks for coming out from Georgia. Appreciate it very much. Thank you. Thank you. All right, one more book to give away. Now, we're going to do it differently this time. You got to raise your hand. I'll call on you. How many years have we been doing the 9/11 service here at Mountain Ridge? Ten, Sandy. Okay, here you go. Here you go. All right. Yeesh. Okay. I don't know. We'll do something different next year. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Hey, so we have honored the pledge. We've met. We've gathered, and we'll do it again next year, September 11th, 2023. We hope that you'll be here. We hope that you'll have some fine words to share with us. We'll have another speaker. There's some coffee out there. We have got great coffee, as you know. We're known for our coffee. So, hey, thank you so much for coming, band. Thanks, great job tonight musically. Thank you. Thank you very much. God bless you guys. Thanks a lot. We love you. Thanks for coming out.